Why is managing people so hard? I mean, I guess I have some insight. This is probably take number 92 on this video trying to record it. If managing myself is hard, then managing someone else is probably going to be magnitudes more difficult than that. I think that the very idea of managing people tends to be tied with this idea that somehow we are overseeing this chessboard of employees and we can just choose which piece to move and it will move exactly as designed, only in that way. When in reality, we're more of living in this giant ecosystem with lots of things happening in lots of different ways. And it's very messy, and people aren't robots, and we aren't robots. Learning how to manage people is skill number 7 on the 8 essential skills to be a successful entrepreneur. And this is a very difficult one to learn. It's hard to learn because there are not great feedback mechanisms to know when you're doing well and when you're doing poorly. Typically, if you're doing poorly, you don't typically know it until time has passed and lots of bad things have happened to you. Unlike a sales skill where you try to use that sales skill on a sales call and it works or it doesn't work, to go back to the lab and retune it. These managerial skills lead to things like a poor company culture. They lead to things like poor morale, which will erode the company from the inside slowly over time, like rusting a hole in a bucket, and you'll feel it later and have trouble going back and pinpointing the initial causes. So, managing people is incredibly difficult, and I really like this quote by Peter Drucker. He was one of the original consultants. He said something along the lines of, "It is not yet proven we can manage ourselves, much less manage other people." And this gets really to the crux of it is one of the first key skills of managing people is managing ourselves. That includes managing our emotions on some level, because if we're spun up and anxious and angry about other things in the business and we talk to an employee, there's a high chance we actually direct that at them on accident. So that's one of those key things is managing ourselves as much as possible. Number 2 is actually having clear things we're managing our employees towards doing. So if we haven't done the previous step of getting systems and processes put together, how is the employee supposed to do things accurately if the expectations and training are not clear? It's very, very difficult. I would say that I oftentimes recommend newer managers look at Super Nanny, the TV show. I think it's streaming currently. A nanny comes into a house with some kids that are being very unruly. She helps turn them around. What's really interesting about this is the process she uses is very similar to just basic quality management practices. Those include knowing what the expectations are, communicating them very clearly to the people you'd like to follow those expectations. When they don't follow them, because they won't, because they're not sure if you're serious, you reinforce how important it is that they do follow them or they'll have consequences. And then number 4 is to follow through on those consequences you laid out. If you follow this pathway, it's very easy to help people understand what is expected of them. Now, some might just decide that is too much work. They don't want to do that job. They can self-select and leave. But many would be happy to do what you'd like them to do if they just knew what that was. And this is the process to get them there. So managing people is very, very difficult. And I would say that there are a few things that happen in the process of becoming a better manager. One is that we need to take extreme ownership. This idea comes from Jocko Willink's book. He was a Navy SEAL. He helped evaluate Navy SEAL commanders. And what he found was that the commanders who came in after a training mission, they complained about everyone else in their squad. Their artillery guy, he wasn't there on time. The other guy didn't do his job. The other guy didn't do his job. The ones that basically threw everyone under the bus and took no accountability for themselves tended to not be good managers. The ones who actually would come in and take personal accountability for all those actions had the chance to become a better manager. And what that looked like would be, instead of saying that the artillery guy wasn't where he was supposed to be, they would take responsibility and say, I must not have communicated clearly where he was supposed to be at what time, or he would have probably been there. They have to take that accountability on themselves and what they had in interaction. As a manager, the instant you start doing this, you recognize that you don't have full control over everything, but if you act like you do, it always gives you learning lessons to execute on for the future to make things better and better and better. That's one of the key things. Number 2 is that as employers, we can become jaded sometimes. We've had some tough experiences with employees, and if we think back, some of those might have been our fault, but it's easy just to point the finger at the employees and say it was them, they were the problem. And this is where you can get jaded very quickly and go into what I call Seinfeld's girlfriend territory. So on the show Seinfeld, Jerry Seinfeld was always having a new girlfriend and always breaking up for the smallest, most minuscule of reasons. She was a close talker. She had small hands. She made him wear a puffy shirt. There's lots of small reasons to break up. He would go find a new woman, and it wouldn't be long before he would be breaking up with her for a different minuscule reason. So, as employers, it's easy to all of a sudden find the fault in the employee that justifies the firing and repeat the process over and over again. But if we haven't done our work to make it a quality work environment and really been clear on what are the basic requirements for the job, what are the non-negotiables, and then how is that job done, it's really hard to manage people. So a little bit of interesting Q&A you can do. I like to use focus groups of people around me. Going about your day-to-day life, ask people about their work life. Ask them how many great managers they've had. People who helped develop them, took care of them, made them into better employees. Ask how many horrible managers they've had. Managers that were abusive, that yelled, that didn't set up fair structures. Most people actually leave a manager and not a job. I would imagine this is going to be a higher number in my experience than the good managers. Then you can have okay managers. How many weren't really good or bad? They were just sort of there. Use this as a reference to see how big of a chance and opportunity it is to become one of these great managers. People love to work for great managers. In this time, whenever hiring people was really, really hard, great managers had much less difficulty hiring people because it was a positive work environment. So learning how to hire, train, manage, onboard, develop people is one of the key skills to be a successful entrepreneur, and it is one that cannot be neglected if you'd like to scale to another level without having the constant stress of hiring, firing, and micromanaging employees. Best of luck to you. Have a great day.